I'm too small, too different, Nova thought, staring at her reflection in the polished alloy panel. Prilorian society valued size, the sheer mass of a warrior capable of crushing bone with a thought, or the towering stature of an engineer able to manipulate energy fields with their bare hands. She possessed neither. Every line of code she wrote, every intricate circuit she designed, seemed insignificant compared to the hulking war machines that filled the engineering bays. A shadow fell across the panel. Andrew Lewis, a human warrior, a veteran etched with the scars of 1,000 battles, each mark a testament to his strength, his resilience. He was a mountain of muscle and hardened steel, easily twice her height, his presence radiating a quiet, dangerous energy. He stopped directly in front of her, his shadow engulfing her completely. Despite his formidable appearance, his expression was surprisingly gentle, almost curious. His eyes, the color of a stormy Terran sea, scanned her, lingering for a moment as if noticing something beyond her small stature. He broke the silence, his voice a low rumble that resonated through the deck plating. "You're exactly what I've been looking for." Nova's breath hitched. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Was he mocking her? Did he need her to fetch him a tool, a component too small for his massive hands? What could a human warrior, a legend whispered in hushed tones throughout the galaxy, possibly want from a small, insignificant Prilorian engineer? The scene shifted, the sterile hum of the corridor fading into the cacophony of a Prilorian engineering bay. Sparks flew from welding torches, the clang of metal echoed off the reinforced walls, and the air hung thick with the smell of ozone and burning lubricant. Colossal war machines, half-finished and overflowing with weaponry, dominated the space, testaments to the Prilorian obsession with overwhelming firepower. Nova remembered the recent alliance between humans and Prilorians. A shaky union, forged out of necessity against a common enemy. Many Prilorians viewed the alliance with thinly veiled contempt, seeing humans as physically weak, relying on cunning and technology where true warriors used brute force. A senior Prilorian engineer, Goran, his massive frame dwarfing even the war machines, lumbered towards her, a sneer twisting his features. "Little Nova," he rumbled, his voice dripping with disdain, "assigned to babysit the human envoy. I trust you haven't broken anything. Or yourself." He let out a harsh, barking laugh. "Perhaps you can hold his hand while the real engineers do their work." Andrew stepped forward, his presence immediately silencing Goran. "I require Nova's expertise," he stated, his voice firm and unwavering. "We've recently recovered a piece of precursor technology, an energy matrix of unknown origin. Initial scans suggest it may hold the key to unlocking a significant advantage in galactic warfare." The precursor technology sat in the center of the bay, encased in a shimmering containment field. It was a complex lattice of interwoven energy conduits, pulsating with a faint, ethereal light. A low, almost imperceptible hum emanated from within, a sound that seemed to resonate deep within Nova's bones, a song she couldn't quite decipher. Goran scoffed, crossing his massive arms over his chest. "Precursor tech requires strength of mind to analyze such things. Strength comes from physical prowess, something you humans and some Prilorians clearly lack. Why choose the weakest candidate, human? Sentimentality." Andrew's gaze hardened, but his voice remained calm. "The precursor tech requires a delicate touch, Goran, a strategic mind capable of unraveling its complex structure, not brute force." He turned his attention back to Nova, his expression softening. "Intelligence is a weapon engineer, one the Prilorians seem to undervalue." Despite her reservations, despite the years of ingrained insecurity, a surge of defiance coursed through Nova. She wanted to prove Goran wrong, to prove herself worthy. "I'll do it," she said, her voice barely a whisper but firm with willpower. "I'll help you analyze the precursor tech." A genuine smile touched Andrew's lips, crinkling the corners of his eyes. He extended his hand towards her, palm open in the human custom, a gesture of partnership, of equality. Nova hesitated. Prilorian society discouraged physical contact, especially between unbonded individuals. Such a gesture was scandalous. She glanced at Goran, whose expression was a mixture of disbelief and disgust. What would her family say? What would her peers think? But in Andrew's eyes she saw only respect, only hope. Nova, hesitant, eventually accepted Andrew's outstretched hand. His grip, though gentle, dwarfed hers, a warm, encompassing pressure that made her acutely aware of the size difference. A minor cultural transgression. The handshake drew subtle stares from other Prilorian engineers, their multifaceted eyes lingering a moment too long before flicking away. She felt a flush rise in her cheeks, a familiar wave of self-consciousness washing over her. Andrew, seemingly oblivious to the attention, led Nova through a labyrinth of corridors, each lined with humming conduits and blinking diagnostic lights, until they reached a secure lab. The air crackled with contained energy. In the center of the room stood the precursor technology, a large, multifaceted crystalline structure, easily 3 times Nova's height. It pulsed with a soft, internal light, a rhythmic thrum that vibrated through the floor and into her very bones. The crystal's facets shifted and swirled with inner light, displaying an array of colors that seemed to defy known spectra. Nova approached cautiously, her small fingers, nimble and precise, manipulating the intricate controls of a nearby diagnostic console with practiced ease. Sparks of blue energy danced between her fingertips as she rerouted power conduits. Andrew observed from a respectful distance, his keen eyes following her every movement, impressed by her dexterity and focused intensity. "The precursor tech requires 2 users to analyze it," Nova said, her voice echoing slightly in the large chamber. "I can handle the engineering aspects, but your combat senses, as you call them, might be useful in detecting subtle energy fluctuations." She gestured to a series of complex readings on the console's display. "I've never seen anything like this. The energy signatures seem almost sentient." Just then, the lab doors hissed open, and Goran strode in, flanked by a group of Prilorian engineers, each towering over Nova. Goran's expression was a mask of barely concealed disdain. "Lewis," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension, "surely you jest. Including such an obviously inferior team is a waste of valuable time. We could have had preliminary scans completed hours ago." Andrew turned, his gaze hardening. "Goran," he said, his voice a low rumble that silenced the room. "Nova's skill is exactly what's needed here. Her understanding of energy dynamics is unparalleled. I trust her judgment implicitly." He met Goran's gaze unflinchingly. "I suggest you and your team find another assignment." Goran's face flushed crimson. He shot a venomous glance at Nova before turning and stalking out of the lab, his team grumbling in his wake. The doors hissed shut behind them. As Nova resumed her work, her fingers flying across the console, she explained, "The precursor technology seems to respond to specific energy signatures, but they are incredibly faint and difficult to isolate. It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands." Andrew, his senses honed by years of combat, focused his attention on the crystalline structure. He closed his eyes, filtering out the ambient noise of the lab, and concentrated on the subtle vibrations emanating from the crystal. After a moment, his eyes snapped open. "There," he said, pointing to a seemingly seamless section of the crystal. A faint energy fluctuation, almost imperceptible. Nova frowned, consulting her readings. "I don't see anything." Andrew stepped closer to the crystal, running his hand along its smooth surface. He pressed lightly on a specific point, and a hidden access panel slid open, revealing a small cavity filled with a series of glyphs of unknown origin. The glyphs glowed with a soft, internal light, their intricate patterns hinting at a deeper meaning. "What are those?" Nova breathed, her eyes wide with surprise. "I don't know," Andrew admitted, but they seem key to unlocking the technology's full potential. Nova immediately began deciphering the glyphs, cross-referencing them with ancient Prilorian texts and human linguistic databases. Hours blurred into a focused frenzy of research and analysis. As they worked, a terrifying truth began to emerge. I don't believe it, Nova stammered, her voice permeated with disbelief. The precursor tech, it must be activated through a combination of Prilorian emotion and human logic, but more than that, Prilorian aggression can power the device to make weapons. Andrew and Nova shared a look of concern, a silent acknowledgement of the massive implications. Human/Prilorian relations so carefully cultivated could have unintended devastating consequences. During a brief respite as they sipped synthesized nutrient paste, Nova turned to Andrew, her expression troubled. "I'm not sure I'm up to this," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "My people, they expect so much, and I'm just small. What if I fail?" Andrew set down his nutrient paste and turned to face her, his expression gentle. "Nova," he said, his voice firm but kind, "I've seen battles where size and strength meant nothing, where the only thing that mattered was intelligence, adaptability, and the will to survive. You have all of those qualities in abundance. Don't underestimate yourself." He paused, then added, "Besides, I'm here to help. But I want to prove my worth," she countered. "I want my people to know that I'm more than just a malfunction." Andrew nodded in understanding. "Then show them," he said. "Show them what you're capable of." Nova led Andrew out of the lab, through the winding corridors of the research facility, and towards the central arena where the Prilorian rite of ascendancy was held. She wanted Andrew to see her culture, to understand the challenges she faced. The arena was a massive amphitheater carved into the rock, its tiered seating filled with Prilorians of all shapes and sizes, their multifaceted eyes glinting in the artificial light. The air thrummed with anticipation. Unseen in the shadows, a Prilorian saboteur, clad in dark clothing, muttered about the weakness of the Alliance as he tampered with Nova's equipment, carefully damaging the intricate mechanisms of her ascension suit. As Nova prepared to take her place in the arena, ready to face the challenges of the rite of ascendancy, she discovered the sabotage. Her heart sank. Nova stared at the mangled power conduits, a hiss of escaping energy the only sound in the chamber. Her fingers, usually nimble and precise, clenched into fists. The sabotage was thorough, deliberate, not just a random act of vandalism but a calculated assault on her modifications. "Damn it," she muttered, the word echoing in the vast space. Years of meticulous work, countless hours spent refining the energy matrix, all undone in a few brutal strikes. Andrew, his face grim, knelt beside her, his large hands gently probing the damaged components. "Military-grade disruptor," he stated, his voice low. "Precise application. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." He ran a hand along a severed cable. "And why?" Nova's gaze sharpened. "They targeted the harmonic stabilizers, the ones I designed to compensate for the energy fluctuations. But how?" "They've been watching you, Nova," Andrew said, his eyes meeting hers. "Observing your work, learning your methods. This wasn't just about stopping you, it was about discrediting your innovations." The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her skills, the very thing she was trying to prove, had made her a target. Frustration warred with a surge of grit. She wouldn't let them win. "We can fix it," she declared, her voice firm. "It won't be perfect, but we can salvage enough to complete the rite." Andrew nodded, a spark of admiration in his eyes. "All right, let's see what we can find." Together, they began scavenging parts from other damaged training equipment, their movements efficient and coordinated. Nova directed Andrew, explaining the intricacies of the Prilorian technology, while he used his battlefield experience to assess the structural integrity of the salvaged components. He suggested reinforcing a weakened joint with a technique he'd learned on a distant planet, a trick that added surprising stability. Hours passed in a blur of sparks, grinding metal and muttered instructions. Finally, a makeshift repair took shape, a Frankensteinian patchwork of salvaged parts and borrowed technology. It was far from elegant, but Nova was cautiously optimistic. "It's stable," she announced, running a diagnostic scan. "But the energy output is erratic. There's a high risk of overload." "How high?" Andrew asked, his expression serious. "High enough," Nova admitted, "that I wouldn't recommend standing within 10 meters of it during the final test." A ghost of a smile touched Andrew's lips. "Then I guess I'll have to get closer." "Andrew, no," Nova protested, her voice infused with concern. "It's too dangerous." "We both know they'll try something else to stop you," he countered, his gaze unwavering. "I'm going with you, Nova, to ensure your safety, and to make sure the playing field is level." Nova hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Thank you, Andrew." The rite of ascendancy began at dawn, a spectacle of physical prowess and mental acuity. Prylorian warriors, clad in gleaming armor, competed in a series of grueling challenges, cheered on by the assembled crowds. Nova, standing alongside Andrew, felt a surge of nervous energy. The first challenge was a test of strength, requiring participants to lift a massive energy core and carry it across a treacherous obstacle course. Nova watched as the larger Prylorians strained and struggled, their muscles bulging with effort. She knew she couldn't compete with them in brute force. But the second challenge was different. A narrow tunnel system, riddled with obstacles and dead ends, designed to test agility and spatial reasoning. Nova's small size became an advantage. She navigated the tight passages with ease, squeezing through gaps that larger Prylorians were forced to bypass. She could hear Goran's frustrated grunts behind her, his progress hampered by his bulk. Finally, she reached the mental acuity test, a complex energy matrix that required precise manipulation to unlock a hidden code. This was her specialty, but as she began to work, a flicker of instability ran through the system. The makeshift repairs were failing. A surge of energy ripped through the chamber, arcing and crackling around Nova, the air filled with the smell of ozone. Warning klaxons blared. The system was about to overload. Without hesitation, Andrew lunged forward, throwing himself between Nova and the failing energy matrix. He wrapped his arms around the sparking conduits, his body acting as a ground for the runaway energy. A jolt of raw power coursed through him, his muscles convulsing, his face contorted in pain. "Nova, now!" he gasped, his voice strained. Inspired by Andrew's selflessness, Nova's mind raced. She couldn't shut down the system. That would mean failure. But she could reroute the energy flow, diverting it away from the overloaded circuits. With lightning-fast precision, she reconfigured the energy pathways, channeling the excess power into a secondary containment field. The energy surge subsided. The klaxons fell silent. The system stabilized. Nova had done it. She had completed the mental acuity test. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the crowd. Some Prylorians applauded, impressed by her ingenuity and drive. Others, like Goran and his supporters, scowled, muttering about Andrew's interference. Watching from a shadowed balcony, a Prylorian general, his face etched with disdain, observed the scene. He activated a hidden comlink. "Monitor the human," he rasped into the device. "Every move, every contact." As Nova and Andrew left the rite, Nova turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. I don't know what to say, Andrew. You saved me." Andrew shrugged, dismissing her thanks. "You saved yourself, Nova. All I did was provide a little grounding. Your intelligence and resilience are what got you through it." He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. "Besides," he added, "I wouldn't have missed that for the world. That was some impressive rerouting." Nova smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Despite the challenges, despite the prejudice, she had proven herself, and she hadn't done it alone. The cheers that had greeted Nova's victory in the rite of ascendancy still echoed faintly in the vast arena, but Goran's voice cut through them like a shard of ice. This is no victory. She cheated. The human interfered, invalidating the entire contest. A ripple of murmurs spread through the Prylorian crowd, their multifaceted eyes shifting from Nova to Andrew, suspicion clouding their gazes. Nova, her small frame trembling slightly, stepped forward. "That's not true. I completed the rite fairly. Andrew only offered guidance." Her voice, usually confident when discussing engineering schematics, wavered under the weight of their scrutiny. Andrew moved to stand beside her, his towering presence a stark contrast to Nova's diminutive stature. He spoke calmly, his voice carrying across the arena. "Goran, with all due respect, Nova's intelligence and resourcefulness were the keys to her success. I simply offered a different perspective, one that you, in your adherence to tradition, failed to see." He met Goran's furious gaze unflinchingly. Her victory is well-deserved. Later, in the relative privacy of Nova's family's dwelling, her mother, Lyra, placed a gentle hand on Nova's shoulder. "Daughter, we are proud of your accomplishment, but this alliance with the humans, this relationship, it is causing unrest. Are you certain this is wise?" Nova sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Mother, Andrew is not like the others. He sees me for who I am, not just my size or my differences." That night, under the soft glow of the Prylorian moon, Nova and Andrew stood on a balcony overlooking the city. "They'll never accept us, will they?" Nova asked, her voice barely a whisper. Andrew cupped her face in his hands, his gaze intense. "They will, Nova. They will see the strength of our bond, the benefits of our alliance. But it won't be easy. We have to be strong for each other." He lowered his head and kissed her softly, a promise of unwavering support in a world that seemed determined to tear them apart. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit chamber deep within the military compound, General Vorak listened intently as his subordinate, Rel, reported. "The human, Lewis, spends much of his time with the engineer, Nova. He is gaining influence, General. Others are starting to listen to his unconventional ideas." Vorak's mandibles clicked together in displeasure. The alliance was a mistake. "The humans are weak, easily manipulated. They will undermine our strength, our traditions." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Fabricate evidence. Implicate Lewis in the theft of sensitive technology. Make it appear as though he was planning to share it with his own kind." Rel nodded, a cruel smile spreading across his face. He accessed the secure database, skillfully altering records to show that Andrew had downloaded schematics for a powerful energy weapon. He added a coded message, seemingly from Andrew to a human contact, discussing the weapon's capabilities and its potential use against the Prylorians. The following day, Andrew was reviewing security protocols when he noticed a discrepancy in the energy grid monitoring system. A section of the grid, vital for the city's defense, showed a brief but significant power surge. He frowned. That wasn't in the logs. He examined the system more closely, recognizing the subtle signs of tampering, the hallmarks of a skilled saboteur. He sought out Nova, finding her in her workshop surrounded by holographic displays and intricate circuitry. "Nova, I think someone is trying to undermine the alliance. I found evidence of sabotage in the security systems." Nova's eyes widened in alarm. "Sabotage? But who would do such a thing?" "Someone who doesn't want humans and Prylorians working together," Andrew replied grimly. "Someone who sees us as a threat." Nova accessed the security system logs, her fingers flying across the console. "There's a hidden backdoor," she announced, her voice tight with concern. "Someone bypassed the main security protocols and accessed the system directly." Andrew, drawing on his experience in counterintelligence, used his knowledge of human investigation techniques to help Nova trace the backdoor. They worked together, their minds merging as they followed the digital trail, until it led them to a specific location within the Prylorian military compound, Rel's office. They found encrypted files on Rel's personal datapad, containing detailed plans for disrupting the alliance and framing Andrew for treason. But it was all circumstantial. They needed concrete proof to expose the conspiracy. That evening, as they sat in Nova's small apartment, the weight of the situation pressing down on them, Andrew reached out and took Nova's hand. "I never imagined it would come to this," he said, his voice filled with concern. "I never imagined I could feel this way about someone." Nova squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We'll get through this, Andrew, together. We have to." They decided to gather more evidence before confronting General Vorak, knowing that a direct accusation without proof would be suicide. They planned to infiltrate Rel's office again, hoping to find the original, unaltered files that would expose the conspiracy. But as they approached Rel's office, they were ambushed by a squad of Prylorian soldiers, their energy rifles trained on Andrew. "Andrew Lewis, you are under arrest for treason against the Prylorian people," their leader barked. Nova stepped in front of Andrew, her small frame defiant. "This is a mistake. He's innocent." "Stand aside, Nova," the leader ordered. "He has been accused of sharing sensitive technology with the humans." Andrew pulled Nova behind him. "I'm not going anywhere without her." The soldiers opened fire. Andrew and Nova dove for cover, energy bolts searing the air around them. They returned fire, using their combined skills to outwit the soldiers in the close-quarters fight. Andrew's combat experience, coupled with Nova's knowledge of the compound's layout, gave them a slight advantage. But they were outnumbered. They fought their way through the corridors, evading capture, until they reached an emergency exit. They burst out into the night, becoming fugitives within Prylorian society. General Vorak, upon hearing of the incident, seized the opportunity. He broadcast a message across the city, painting Andrew as a dangerous spy and Nova as a traitor to her people. "The human alliance has been exposed for what it is, a deception. Andrew Lewis attempted to steal our technology and betray our trust." Nova, blinded by her infatuation, aided him in his treachery. As they hid in the shadows, listening to Vorak's propaganda, Nova and Andrew realized the gravity of their situation. They had to clear Andrew's name and expose the conspiracy before the situation spiraled completely out of control. But how? "A place they won't expect," Nova said, her voice tight with drive. She pulled Andrew through the deserted corridors, her small frame surprisingly agile. "There's a hidden engineering workshop, a sanctuary of sorts. Only a few trusted Prylorians know of it." The workshop was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the Prylorian military complex. Located deep beneath the city, it was a cramped space filled with outdated but functional equipment. The air hummed with the low thrum of power converters and smelled of ozone and lubricant. Nova activated the lights, casting the room in a harsh, white glow. "Let's see what they've fabricated," Andrew said, his gaze hardening as he examined the holographic projections of the evidence against him. Nova worked beside him, her fingers flying across the console, pulling up schematics and data logs. Hours blurred as they dissected the evidence, searching for inconsistencies. Nova noticed a discrepancy in the energy signature of a manipulated data file. "This doesn't match Prylorian energy standards," she stated. "It's human." Meanwhile, across the city, news reports blared from public screens. The Prylorian general's face, stern and imposing, filled the displays. "The human Andrew Lewis is a dangerous saboteur," the news anchor declared, aided by the traitor Nova. "They seek to undermine our glorious nation." The faces of passers-by hardened, suspicion clouding their eyes. Distrust spread like a virus. Collaborative engineering projects between humans and Prylorians were halted. Security checkpoints became more frequent, the guards' gazes colder. Small acts of prejudice, whispered insults, and averted eyes became commonplace. Nova tried to contact her family. The comm screen flickered to life, revealing her mother's strained face. "Nova, please," her mother pleaded, her voice trembling. "For your own sake, distance yourself from this human. The council, they are watching us." The screen went black, leaving Nova staring at her own reflection, her heart aching. In the military council chambers, the general addressed the assembled officers. "This human treachery is a wake-up call," he boomed, his voice resonating with false conviction. "We must strengthen our defenses, secure our borders, and eliminate this human threat once and for all." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Later, in a dimly lit office, the general issued a chilling order. "The human diplomat, Ambassador Phillips," he said to his subordinate, his voice low and menacing, "arrange an accident. Make sure it looks like Lewis was responsible." Back in the workshop, Nova's fingers danced across the holographic display. "There," she exclaimed, pointing to a series of seemingly random characters embedded within a data stream. "A coded message." Andrew leaned in, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's a variation of a human encryption method," he said, his voice infused with surprise. "Which means someone else is involved, someone with knowledge of human codes." Working together, they deciphered the message. "Abandoned research facility," Nova read, her voice barely a whisper. "Remote mountains, meeting point." "The Aris Thorn facility," Nova murmured, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "It was shut down years ago. Dr. Thorn was brilliant, but eccentric. He might be able to help." "We have to find him," Andrew said, his voice firm. "He's our only lead." They set out under the cover of darkness, traveling towards the remote mountains. As they journeyed, they came across a refugee camp, a desolate collection of makeshift shelters huddled against the cold. The Prilorians there were gaunt, their eyes hollow with hunger and despair. The anti-human sentiment had cut off their supply lines, leaving them to starve. Nova's face was etched with compassion. "The water purification system is damaged," one of the refugees said, his voice weak. "We have no clean water." Without hesitation, Nova set to work, her engineering skills shining through. She diagnosed the problem, rerouted power conduits, and recalibrated the filtration system. Within hours, clean water flowed freely, bringing smiles to the faces of the weary refugees. "Thank you," an elderly woman said, her voice filled with gratitude. "May the stars guide you. Be careful," she warned. "The general's patrols have increased. They're searching for you." They pressed on, the refugees' warning weighing heavily on their minds. Finally, the abandoned research facility loomed before them, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. It was heavily guarded, soldiers patrolling the perimeter with energy rifles. They attempted to infiltrate the facility under the cover of darkness, Nova disabling security cameras while Andrew provided cover. A sudden flash of light, a searing pain. Andrew stumbled, clutching his chest. A crimson stain bloomed on his uniform. He crumpled to the ground. Nova's fingers flew across Andrew's torn armor, the metallic tang of blood filling her nostrils. "Energy weapon, low yield," she murmured, her voice tight. "Serious, but the cauterization saved you. For now." She ripped a strip of plasteel plating from a discarded console, its edges sharp against her palm. Using her multi-tool, she carefully softened the edges and folded the plasteel into a makeshift splint. Securing it with synth fiber cord scavenged from a broken data cable, she created a rigid support for his injured arm. "This will stabilize it, but you need proper medical attention soon." Andrew gritted his teeth, his face pale but his eyes still sharp. "Expose the conspiracy," he rasped, each word a struggle. "That's the priority. My pain is secondary." Nova met his gaze, seeing the unwavering commitment that defined him. "We need to find you a safe place to recover first. I can't focus on anything else if I'm worried about you bleeding out." She glanced around the abandoned corridor, its flickering lights casting long, distorted shadows. "There has to be somewhere inside that facility." Andrew nodded slowly, wincing. "Agreed, but stealth is paramount. They'll be on high alert." Drawing on the training Andrew had imparted, Nova moved with a newfound confidence. She scanned the environment, identifying blind spots in the security camera coverage, noting the patrol patterns of the guards visible on distant monitors. She pointed to a shadowed alcove. "They're using standard rotation patterns. We can slip past them there." She led the way, her small frame allowing her to hug the walls and move unseen. They reached a section where the outer wall of the research facility met the cliff face. Nova ran her hand along the cold duracrete, feeling for any irregularity. "There," she exclaimed, her fingers tracing the outline of a concealed access panel. An old ventilation shaft, small but perfect. Andrew tried to peer into the opening, but his larger frame blocked the light. "Too small for me. You'll have to go in alone." Nova hesitated, a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. "But I'll be safe here," Andrew insisted, leaning against the wall. "I'll have comms open, just be careful." He handed her his sidearm, a heavy pulse pistol that felt enormous in her small hand. With a deep breath, Nova activated the access panel, revealing a narrow, cylindrical shaft. She squeezed inside, the cool, stale air filling her lungs. The darkness swallowed her whole. Inside, the ventilation shaft was a labyrinth of twisting metal. She crawled forward, her hands scraping against the rough surface. The air grew thick with dust and the metallic scent of decay. After what felt like an eternity, she reached an intersection of several shafts. Faint energy signatures pulsed from one of the tunnels. "Andrew, I'm picking up something," she whispered into the comm. "Faint energy readings. I think it's coming from this direction." "Proceed with caution," Andrew's voice crackled in her ear. Nova followed the energy signature, the shaft gradually widening until she reached a maintenance hatch. She carefully pried it open, revealing a dimly lit laboratory. The room was a chaotic jumble of equipment, wires, and half-finished experiments. Data screens flickered erratically, displaying complex schematics and equations. Notes scribbled on datapads were scattered across every surface. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, gaunt Prelorian with wild, graying hair and eyes that gleamed with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. He wore a stained lab coat and carried a sonic screwdriver. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice raspy. Nova raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm Nova. I know DRIS is Dr. Thorne's lab. We need your help." Thorne's eyes narrowed. "How do you know my name? And what makes you think I'd help anyone?" Nova quickly explained the situation: Andrew's injury, the conspiracy, the general's betrayal. She described their urgent need to clear Andrew's name and expose the truth. Thorne listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Help, after what this society has done to me, to my work, you're asking the wrong person." He waved a hand dismissively at the cluttered lab. "This was once a beacon of scientific advancement, now it's a tomb." "But your research," Nova protested, her voice filled with passion. "The potential you saw, it could still make a difference. We need you to bring it back to life." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You were trying to create a better future for Prylos, and General Varkos is undoing all of that." Thorne's gaze softened slightly, a flicker of the idealist he once was. "My vision, yes, but it was naive. This world is rotten to the core." He sighed heavily. "I was forced to shut down my research after I discovered evidence of the General's illegal activities. He's using this facility for something. Something terrible. What is it?" Nova pressed, her heart pounding. "I suspect he's developing secret weapons," Thorne said, his voice low. "Powered by stolen human technology. He intends to use it to break the Alliance and start a war." Nova's mind raced. "Then you have to help us stop him." Thorne hesitated, his eyes darting around the lab. "There is a way, a hidden security terminal. It would allow us to access the facility's surveillance system, see what he's really up to." He paused, a grim expression on his face. "But it's booby-trapped. Varkos made sure of that. One wrong move and will trigger an alarm that will bring the entire garrison down on us." As Thorne reached for a panel hidden behind a stack of datapads, a piercing siren blared through the facility. Red lights flashed, bathing the lab in an ominous glow. "Too late," Thorne shouted, his eyes wide with panic. "He knew we were here." On one of the monitors, they saw a live feed of the corridor outside the lab. General Varkos himself, flanked by heavily armed guards, was striding towards them, his face a mask of fury. Suddenly, the door to the lab burst open and Andrew stood there, his face contorted in pain but his eyes blazing with defiance. "Nova, Thorn, get out of here." Thorn stared at Andrew, then back at Nova. "There's one last chance, an experimental teleportation device, never fully tested. Might kill you, but it's our only way out. The calibration, it's not perfect," Thorn stammered, his hands flying across the console. "This device is experimental, highly experimental. The spatial alignment. There's a significant margin for error. We could end up fused with a wall, inside out, or somewhere else entirely," Nova finished, her voice tight. "What's the probability of success?" Thorn's face was slick with sweat. "At best, 60%. But the General's forces are moments away from breaching this door. I'm bypassing the safety protocols to speed up the process." Sparks flew as he rerouted power, the air crackling with ozone. A searing pain shot through Andrew's shoulder as another blast slammed against the door. "Go," he rasped, pushing himself in front of them, his pulse rifle raised. "I'll cover you. Get that thing working." "Andrew, no, your wound." Nova protested, but he cut her off with a steely glare. "Don't argue, just go. That's an order." He braced himself against the door, firing controlled bursts at the approaching Prylorians. The teleportation device hummed, the air shimmering around them. Thorn yelled, "Activating now, brace yourselves." A blinding flash of white light engulfed them, followed by a wave of nausea and disorientation. The light subsided. Nova gasped, stumbling forward. The sterile white of Thorn's lab was gone, replaced by oppressive darkness. The air hung thick with the smell of ozone and decay. Twisted metal and shattered consoles littered the floor. Bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie glow on the walls, revealing strange symbols etched into the metal. Andrew groaned, collapsing against a nearby console. His face was pale, beads of sweat clinging to his brow. He clutched his injured shoulder, his breathing shallow and ragged. "Damn it, that hurt more than it should have." His words were slurred. Nova knelt beside him, her small hands fluttering over his wound. "The teleportation, it's worsened your condition." She could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Get him stable," Thorn said, his voice hushed. "I'll see if I can find a power source." He moved deeper into the darkness, his flashlight beam dancing across the strange technology. Nova activated her wrist-mounted scanner, its blue light illuminating the immediate area. "This isn't just another lab," she murmured, her eyes widening. "This is something else entirely." Intricate circuits and unfamiliar devices lined the walls, far more advanced than anything she had seen in Thorn's lab or even in the Prylorian military facilities. Thorn returned, his face pale. "This is it," he whispered, his voice filled with awe and dread. "This is the original research site for the forgotten tech. They shut it down centuries ago. Nobody knows why." A holographic display flickered to life, revealing grainy images of Prylorian scientists in white coats, working with the strange technology. A voice, ancient and distorted, filled the room. "The potential for planetary terraforming is unprecedented. By amplifying specific emotional states, we can accelerate the growth of vegetation, control the weather patterns, and create a paradise on Prylos." The recording shifted, showing the same scientists, but their faces were gaunt, their eyes filled with a manic intensity. The voice was harsher, distorted with anger. "The technology is evolving beyond our control. The amplification is unpredictable. We are seeing increased aggression, paranoia, and..." The image dissolved into static, replaced by scenes of chaos and destruction. Prylorians battled each other with energy weapons, cities burned, and the sky was filled with smoke. The recording ended abruptly. Nova stared at the blank screen, her heart pounding. "They weaponized it," she whispered. "The technology. It caused a civil war." Thorn nodded grimly. "And the General, he plans to do it again. He's been using stolen human tech to enhance its power to amplify the aggression, the hatred. Andrew struggled to sit up, his face contorted with pain. He wants to conquer Earth, he said, his voice barely a whisper. He wants to unleash that weapon on humanity. We have to stop him, Nova said, her voice filled with purpose. Andrew coughed, blood trickling from his lips. Destroy it, he gasped. Destroy it all, even if it means. He trailed off, his eyes locking with Nova's. Even if it means sacrificing yourselves. Thorne hesitated, his eyes darting around the lab. But the potential. Imagine what we could do with this technology if we could control it. There is no controlling it, Nova snapped. The records are clear, it corrupts, it destroys, we have to end it here. Thorne looked at Andrew, then back at Nova. He saw the purpose in her eyes, the desperation in Andrew's. He sighed. All right, he said, his voice resigned. All right, let's disable the core systems. As Nova and Thorne began to work, bypassing security protocols and rerouting power, a klaxon blared through the lab. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in an ominous glow. Security lockdown initiated, a synthesized voice announced. Unauthorized access detected. All personnel are to remain in their designated areas. A holographic projection flickered to life, revealing the stern face of the Prylorian general. So, he sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. The little engineer and her human pet, I knew you would lead me to this place. Your plans end here, General, Nova said, her voice ringing with defiance. My plans are just beginning, he retorted. With this technology, I will unite Prylos under my rule, and then I will turn my attention to Earth. Your primitive weapons are no match for the amplified might of the Prylorian warrior. The general raised his hand, and a powerful energy shield shimmered into existence around the lab, sealing them inside. Enjoy your final moments, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. You are trapped with a weapon you cannot control, a weapon that will soon bring your worlds to their knees. The projection vanished. Nova frantically scanned the consoles, her fingers flying across the controls. There, she said, pointing to a hidden panel. An override. I can manipulate the energy flow within the device. She paused, her face etched with worry. But there's a risk. If I try to disable the device completely, it could trigger a catastrophic explosion. The entire facility, everything, would be vaporized. Her eyes flickered to Andrew, then back to the panel. Or, she swallowed hard, I could try to redirect its energy, expose the general's plot to the entire Prylorian population and humanity, but if I fail, the amplification will proceed and all will be lost. The Prylosian general's face, amplified and distorted by the forgotten tech, filled every monitor in the lab. His roar of outrage slammed into Nova, a physical force that stole her breath. The forgotten tech pulsed with a furious red light, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the crystalline walls. Outside, the unified chants of Prylosian unity dissolved into fractured shouts, a cacophony of accusation and fear. The general's voice, now echoing across the planet, spat accusations, his words tinged with venom. Traitors, collaborators, you would sacrifice Prylos for the sake of these humans. The energy shield around the lab intensified, a shimmering cage of emerald light that pressed inward, the air crackling with contained power. Andrew groaned, his hand flying to his side. The shield. It's feeding off his rage, he gasped, his voice strained. He forced himself upright, ignoring the blood seeping through his fingers. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he stared at the shimmering barrier. There's a feedback loop, some kind of harmonic resonance. It's almost impenetrable. Thorne, his face pale but determined, stepped forward. I know a way to disrupt it. There's a separate control panel on the far side of the lab. I can reroute the energy flow, break the loop. As Thorne moved toward the panel, his hand brushed against a comm relay, the small device blinking out of existence. Thorne, what was that? Andrew's voice sharpened. You just cut off our communications. Thorne waved a dismissive hand. An accident, I assure you. The EMP field is already interfering with the systems. He hurried towards the control panel, his movements just a little too quick, a little too eager. Nova hesitated, her gaze darting between Thorn and Andrew. I need to verify that, she stammered, her mind racing. She tried to access the shield schematics, but the system refused to respond, locked down by Thorn's earlier adjustments. Thorn reached the control panel and began inputting a complex sequence, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. Almost there. Instead of weakening, the shield flared, its emerald light intensifying, the air thickening with palpable animosity. Cracks spiderwebbed across the crystalline walls of the lab, stress fractures forming under the amplified emotional pressure. Andrew pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain etched on his face. Nova, stop him. He's not disrupting the shield, he's feeding it. Look at the energy readings. Nova stared at the readings Andrew indicated, now barely visible through the flickering displays. The energy signature of the shield had shifted, becoming more chaotic, more aggressive. The tech wasn't just broadcasting, it was amplifying. Thorn, what are you doing? Nova demanded, her voice trembling. Thorn turned, a manic glint in his eyes. I'm saving Prylos, Nova, but not from the humans, from itself. With this technology, I can guide our emotions, control our destiny. No more conflict, no more weakness, only strength, only unity. You want to control us? Nova recoiled, horrified. To manipulate an entire planet. Thorn lunged for the central console of the forgotten tech, his hand outstretched. Imagine, Nova, a Prylos united under my will. No more dissent, no more. A surge of raw energy erupted from the forgotten tech, throwing Thorn against the far wall with bone-jarring force. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious, his body twitching. The energy surge overloaded the shield generators. A blinding flash filled the lab, followed by a deafening silence. The humming of the forgotten tech died down, replaced by an eerie stillness. The holographic displays flickered and died, plunging sections of the lab into darkness. The medical equipment monitoring Andrew flatlined, the rhythmic beeping replaced by a chilling silence. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. The general's forces had breached the outer defenses. Alarms blared, their insistent wails cutting through the silence, replaced by the thud of heavy footsteps and the crackle of energy weapons. Andrew lay still, his chest barely rising and falling. His skin was clammy, his breathing shallow. Nova knelt beside him, her hands trembling. He was fading fast. Her gaze swept across the ruined lab, the disabled equipment, the unconscious Thorn. Then the sounds of approaching Prylosian soldiers. The fate of Prylos, the fate of Andrew rested on her shoulders. Defend Andrew, attempt to repair the system, or flee the lab and let Prylos deal with the signal she sent. Will they embrace peace, or will they descend into war? Nova didn't hesitate. The signal was sent, Prylos was alerted. Now only one thing mattered. Ignoring the distant sounds of approaching reinforcements, she dropped to her knees beside Andrew, her small hands frantically searching for a pulse. Nothing. No, she whispered, her voice cracking. Prylorian physiology was different, but the basics were universal. Remembering a human first aid video she'd once seen, she placed her hands on his chest, her fingers barely spanning its width. She began compressions, pushing down hard, counting in her head. Come on, Andrew, breathe, she urged, her voice trembling. She pinched his nose and forced air into his lungs, watching for any sign of life. The lab was silent save for her ragged breaths and the rhythmic thud of her compressions. A weak cough. Andrew stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. Nova, he rasped, his voice barely audible. Need, med, bay. He coughed again, blood trickling from his lips. He needed immediate medical attention she couldn't provide with half the equipment destroyed. The lab doors burst open and the room flooded with heavily armed Prylorian soldiers, their weapons trained on Nova. At their head stood General Vorlag, his face a mask of cold fury. Nova's mind raced. She was small, barely a match for one of these warriors, let alone a squad. But Andrew. She scrambled back, grabbed a discarded plasma rifle lying near Thorne's body and planted herself between Andrew and the soldiers, the weapon feeling impossibly large in her hands. "Stand down," she shouted, her voice surprisingly firm despite her fear. "I will not let you harm him." The soldiers hesitated, surprised by her defiance. Vorlag scowled. One soldier lunged forward, but Nova reacted instinctively, firing a burst of plasma. The shot went wild, hitting a console, but the sudden discharge startled the soldier, giving Nova time to adjust her aim. The next shot hit its mark, knocking the soldier to the ground. Another soldier charged, and Nova, adrenaline coursing through her veins, dodged his attack and fired again. This time the plasma bolt struck the soldier's weapon, causing it to explode in a shower of sparks. Vorlag pushed his way to the front, his eyes blazing with contempt. He shoved aside a fallen soldier and approached Thorne's prone body. "Thorne," he spat, kicking him lightly. "Pathetic. I expected more." He turned his gaze to Nova, his expression hardening. "And you?" "I should have known a human would corrupt you." He gestured dismissively at Andrew. He was a means to an end. Thorne was the key. He removed the shield so that I could access the forgotten tech. Vorlag paused, his voice dripping with disdain. "Thorne thought he could control it. He thought he could betray me. Fool." Vorlag barked an order to his soldiers. "Secure the device. Eliminate them both." Andrew, his vision swimming, struggled to focus. He saw the general raise his energy weapon, its barrel glowing with unstable power. He recognized the frequency modulation. It was designed to overload Prylorian shields, but it was dangerously volatile. "Nova," he whispered, his voice strained. "His weapon. Frequency. Unstable." He reached out weakly, grabbing her hand. "Forgotten tech. Broadcast. Frequency. Match his weapon. Overload." Nova looked at him, her eyes wide with fear and purpose. She understood. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. She scrambled to the forgotten tech console, her fingers flying across the controls, desperately trying to match the weapon's signature. She connected the device, a surge of energy coursing through the lab. The general's weapon began to hum, the energy intensifying, the air crackling with static. Suddenly, the weapon backfired. A blinding flash, a deafening roar, and a localized explosion ripped through the lab, taking out a chunk of the ceiling and sending soldiers flying. The room filled with smoke and debris. In the chaos, Nova didn't hesitate. She grabbed Andrew, slinging his arm over her shoulder, and stumbled towards the gaping hole in the ceiling. It was a tight fit, but she managed to haul him up and through into the ship's ventilation system. After them, Vorlag roared, coughing in the smoke. "They won't get far. Seal the lab." Nova dragged Andrew through the narrow ventilation shaft, the metal grating scraping against her skin. The system was too small for the larger Prylorians to follow, a small mercy in a desperate situation. She paused, catching her breath, her muscles aching. Andrew was unconscious again, his face pale and clammy. We need to get out of here," Andrew mumbled, his eyes still closed. "Abandoned, shuttle bay, other side, ship, maybe, no guards, shuttle." His voice faded and he slumped against her, unconscious once more. Nova grit her teeth, her small frame trembling with exhaustion. She was alone, deep inside an enemy ship with a wounded human to protect. But she had a plan, a destination, and a flicker of hope. She adjusted Andrew's weight on her shoulder and began her trek through the dark, twisting ventilation system, hoping she could get him to safety. The ventilation shaft pressed against her, cold metal biting into her skin. Each pull, each inch gained, was agony. Andrew's dead weight, compounded by the cramped space, threatened to overwhelm her. She gritted her teeth, muscles screaming in protest, and hauled him forward another few centimeters. A groan escaped Andrew's lips. His head lolled to the side, his eyes fluttering open. "Nova," he rasped, his voice thick with pain. "Leave me, slowing you." "Shut it, Lewis," she snapped, her voice strained. I'm not leaving you." His brief moment of consciousness was more hindrance than help. His thrashing sent jolts of pain through her already aching body. A high-pitched whine cut through the silence. Nova froze, her Prilorian ears picking up a subtle change in the air pressure. A section of the ventilation system ahead, depressurized. She could feel the faint tug, the air being sucked out through a breach somewhere. If they stayed here, Andrew would suffocate even faster. She had to seal it. Ignoring the searing pain in her shoulders, Nova wrestled Andrew into a slightly wider section of the shaft. "Stay here," she commanded, though he was barely conscious enough to register her words. Scrambling forward, she located the nearest access panel, a corroded metal plate secured by a series of bolts. Praying her makeshift toolkit held up, she began to work, the whine of escaping air growing louder. Minutes stretched into an eternity as she fought with the rusted bolts. Finally, with a groan of protesting metal, the panel came loose. She slammed it against the opening, using her body weight to create a temporary seal. The whistling subsided, replaced by the pounding of her own heart. Then a new sound, a rapid, rhythmic clicking growing closer. Drones. The general wasn't wasting any time. They were small, agile reconnaissance drones equipped with infrared sensors and shock prods, designed to flush out insurgents. Nova's mind raced. She needed a distraction. An idea sparked, desperate and risky. She pulled a small device from her toolkit, a repurposed data scrambler she'd salvaged from a wrecked transport. Working quickly, she bypassed the drone's security protocols, her fingers flying across the tiny interface. The clicking grew louder, closer. "Come on, come on," she muttered, sweat stinging her eyes. Finally, a flicker. The drone's red eye turned green. She had it. With a flick of her wrist, she sent the reprogrammed drone whirring back the way they had come, its new programming directing it towards a dead end in the ventilation system, a maintenance junction that had been sealed off years ago. A moment later, the sounds of pursuit shifted. The rapid clicking faded, replaced by frustrated shouts echoing from the distance. It bought them time, but not much. Pushing onward, Nova found a junction in the ventilation system, a crossroads of metal ducts. Scrawled on a faded panel, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting, was a maintenance map. Her heart leaped. A shortcut, a direct route to the shuttle bay, but there was a problem. The shortcut was blocked. A massive fan unit designed to circulate air throughout the section stood directly in their path. It was damaged, one side of the cage torn away, some blades bent at unnatural angles. Most of the blades were still spinning slowly, lethally. "Damn it," she hissed. There was no way around it. She had to disable the fan. Securing Andrew as best she could, Nova crawled towards the damaged unit. The air vibrated with the low hum of the still-functioning blades. One wrong move and, taking a deep breath, she reached out, her hand hovering over the nearest blade. It was spinning slowly, but with enough force to shear off a Prilorian's arm, let alone a human's. She needed to stop it, and fast. Bracing herself, Nova lunged, jamming her multi-tool into the motor housing. Sparks flew as the tool bit into the machinery, the humming stuttering, then dying completely. The blade slowed, then stopped. One down, several more to go. Each blade was a gamble, each movement a potential death sentence. But she pressed on, driven by a desperate hope. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last blade shuddered to a halt. The passage was still tight, but with the blades disabled, it was just barely large enough. Gritting her teeth, Nova began the agonizing process of squeezing Andrew through the narrow opening. Suddenly, a new sound pierced the air, a high-pitched hiss growing louder with each passing second. Gas. Toxic gas. The general was resorting to desperate measures. Nova scrambled back to the map, her mind racing. They needed a sealed section, somewhere the gas couldn't reach. Her eyes scanned the faded diagram, searching for anything that could offer them refuge. There, a maintenance compartment, small but sealed, located just a few meters further down the shaft. She grabbed Andrew, adrenaline surging through her veins, and began to drag him towards the compartment. The hissing grew louder, the air thick with the acrid smell of the deadly gas. Reaching the compartment, Nova saw the door was sealed shut, locked with a complicated electronic lock. No time to waste. She pulled out her data scrambler again, rerouting power and bypassing security protocols. The lock was complex, requiring a delicate touch, and her hands were shaking. The hissing was deafening now, the gas seeping into the ventilation shaft, burning her eyes and throat. Come on, she urged, her fingers dancing across the interface. Finally, with a click, the lock disengaged. The door hissed open, revealing a tiny, cramped space. Nova didn't hesitate. She shoved Andrew inside, then scrambled in after him, slamming the door shut just as a cloud of green gas enveloped the ventilation shaft. They were safe for now, but the general wasn't finished. The muffled clang of metal echoed through the compartment. They were sealing it, welding the door shut. Trapped. Nova slumped against the wall, gasping for breath. This was it. They were going to suffocate. Then her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. A small, circular hatch almost hidden in the shadows, an emergency escape hatch. Hope flared, then died. The hatch was tiny, barely large enough for a Prylorian child. There was no way she could fit Andrew through it. Tears welled in her eyes. She was trapped, and Andrew was going to die. And there was nothing she could do about it. She couldn't leave him. She wouldn't, but what choice did she have? Hot tears streamed down her face. She couldn't breathe. A hand touched her cheek. Nova, Andrew's voice was weak but clear. Don't worry about me. Save yourself. Nova's mind raced, the hum of failing systems a discordant symphony to her rising panic. There had to be a way. Her gaze snapped back to the escape hatch, its unyielding metal a mocking reminder of their predicament. She ran her fingers along the cold seams, her slender fingers tracing the familiar patterns of the locking mechanism. It was designed for Prylorians, built with size restrictions to prevent larger beings from using it, a standard safety protocol. Then a flicker of inspiration, the locking mechanism. If she could just manipulate the sequence, bypass the primary interlocks. She realized that with careful manipulation of the hatch locking mechanism, she could temporarily disable the size restrictor safety measure, enough to pull Andrew through if she could get him close enough. Nova, don't. Andrew's voice was weak, strained. He'd been watching her, gauging her intent. It's too risky. Get out of here, save yourself. His words were slurred, each syllable a monumental effort. Nova whirled, her violet eyes blazing with defiance. No, I'm not leaving you. She scrambled closer, her small hands already working on the access panel. I can disable the size restrictor, but only for a few seconds. We need to create space to get you through. I'm going to temporarily disable the pressure seal on this compartment. Andrew's brow furrowed, confusion battling the pain in his eyes. I'll override the seal, Nova explained, her voice tight with urgency. It will depressurize the compartment rapidly, creating a vacuum effect. It will help pull you through. But... She hesitated, her fingers pausing on the control panel. It will be brutal, the pressure change. It will probably break your existing injuries, maybe cause new ones. You need to prepare yourself mentally. Andrew closed his eyes, his face a mask of pain. He took a deep, shuddering breath. Do it. Nova steeled herself. This was it. She initiated the pressure seal override. A klaxon blared, a high-pitched whine that grated on her nerves. The air grew thin, the temperature plummeting. Condensation formed on the metal walls. Now, Nova cried, grabbing Andrew's arms. She pulled with all her might, her small frame straining against his immense weight. She could hear the sickening crack of bone on bone, a sound that echoed in the rapidly thinning air. Andrew's face contorted in silent agony, his eyes wide with shock. She gritted her teeth, the image of his pain searing into her memory. She managed to get him most of the way through the hatch, his broad shoulders wedged tight before her strength failed. Her arms trembled, her muscles screaming in protest. She couldn't budge him any further. Despair threatened to engulf her, but she pushed it back. Thinking fast, she released her grip and squeezed through the hatch herself, emerging onto the exterior hull. The ship was cold against her bare hands. She scrambled to the other side of the hatch, planting her feet against the slick metal. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed Andrew's arms again and pulled with new hope. With a final, agonizing heave, she managed to yank him free. He tumbled through the hatch, landing heavily on the hull beside her. As Andrew cleared the hatch and Nova followed, the modified safety protocol failed. With a loud hiss, the hatch slammed shut, sealing them outside. They were adrift in the silent void, clinging to the hull of the crippled ship, their oxygen supply dwindling with each passing second. The blackness of space pressed in on them, an endless, unforgiving void. Then, Nova noticed something. They were near the ship's communication array, a massive structure of interwoven metal that pulsed with energy. A strong electromagnetic field radiated from it, bathing them in an invisible tide of power. An idea sparked in Nova's mind. She believed she could use the electromagnetic field to send a distress signal, to amplify their faint hope and broadcast it across the vast expanse of space to any nearby human ships. Andrew, drifting in and out of consciousness, his body a mangled mess, managed to croak Numberova. "No, the field. It will damage your tech. Harm you." His voice was barely a whisper. Nova ignored him. She had to try. Desperation fueled her actions. She pulled a small multi-tool from her belt, its polished surface reflecting the cold starlight. She began to modify the communication array, rerouting power, bypassing safety protocols, pushing the system far beyond its design limits. The electromagnetic field intensified, a tangible force that tugged at her skin, making her vision blur. Her coordination faltered, her hands trembling as she worked. She pushed through the pain, driven by a single, unwavering purpose. Finally, she managed to amplify the signal. A burst of energy erupted from the array, a silent scream cast into the void. The electromagnetic field reached a fever pitch, and Nova's vision tunneled. The signal went out. Just as Nova collapsed, her body succumbing to the overwhelming force of the electromagnetic field, she saw a blinking light far away in the distance. A ship. A ship had picked up their signal, but before she completely lost consciousness, Nova spotted something else approaching them from the darkness of space, a small, heavily armed Prylorian patrol craft, its sleek hull glinting in the starlight. The patrol craft opened fire not at them, but at the ship they were attached to. The ship bucked violently. Alarms blared, a cacophony of distorted warnings that dissolved into a ringing silence as Nova's head slammed against a console. Pain lanced through her skull. The acrid smell of burning circuits filled her nostrils, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. Then, nothing. She awoke to the sterile scent of disinfectant and the rhythmic hum of life support systems. Her vision swam, resolving slowly into the pale blue walls of a Prylorian military medical bay. A low throb pulsed behind her eyes. Wires snaked from her arm, feeding her nutrients and medication. Andrew. Where was Andrew? The door hissed open, and a towering figure filled the frame. General Tarok. His chitinous armor gleamed under the harsh lights, and his mandibles clicked with disapproval. He radiated an aura of cold authority. "Nova," he said, his voice a low rumble, "I am disappointed." Nova struggled to sit up, wincing at the sharp pain in her ribs. "General, what happened? Where's Andrew?" Tarok's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "Your human companion is being processed. As for what happened, your vessel was attacked. A regrettable incident." "Attacked? By whom?" "By those who believe you have compromised Prylorian security with your affiliations." Tarok's gaze was unwavering, accusatory. "Your relationship with this human is a dangerous distraction, Nova. It clouds your judgment and makes you vulnerable. Andrew has done nothing wrong. He's an ally. An ally who conveniently appeared just before your ship was ambushed. An ambush orchestrated by Prylorian extremists, I might add." He paused, letting the words sink in. They oppose the alliance with humanity, and they see you as a symbol of its corruption. Nova felt a chill run down her spine. Extremists, you mean? This was planned. Indeed, and your human companion is now suspected of complicity. He is being questioned. Her heart clenched. I need to see him. Tarak shook his head, his mandibles clicking again. That is not possible. His interrogation is ongoing. Security protocols must be maintained. Flashback. Andrew groaned as consciousness returned, his head pounding. He was in a small, windowless cell. The walls were cold and damp. A single harsh light buzzed overhead. 2 Prylorian guards stood impassively outside the energy bars of his cell. A voice, amplified and distorted, echoed from a hidden speaker. Andrew Lewis, you are accused of conspiring with enemies of the Prylorian people to destabilize the alliance between our species. That's insane, Andrew shouted, his voice raw. I was attacked. I was helping Nova. Silence. You will answer our questions. What do you know about the attack on the transport ship? I know nothing. I told you there's a conspiracy. Some Prylorians don't want the alliance to work. They orchestrated the attack to frame me, to sabotage everything. The voice on the speaker remained cold and unmoved. Your claims are unsubstantiated. You will cooperate or face the consequences. Back in the medical bay, Nova pleaded with Tarak. Please, General, I know Andrew is innocent. Let me talk to him. I can prove it. Your emotional attachment is clouding your judgment, Nova. Your request is denied. Tarak turned to leave. He will be transferred to a high-security facility on Cathar Prime shortly. Perhaps there his allegiances will become clearer. Cathar Prime. A prison planet known for its brutal conditions. Nova's stomach churned. She had to do something. Left alone, Nova ripped the wires from her arm, ignoring the protesting alarms. She needed to reach Andrew, and she needed to find proof of his innocence. Tarak clearly wasn't going to help. She had to help herself. Her small size, often a source of insecurity, suddenly presented an advantage. The medical bay was crammed with equipment. Prylorian engineers, accustomed to their larger frames, often overlooked the tighter spaces. Using her knowledge of the base's schematics, a skill she'd honed during her engineering training, Nova began to navigate the cramped corridors behind the medical bay's walls. She bypassed several security checkpoints, her nimble fingers quickly rerouting power and disabling sensors. She reached a ventilation shaft that led towards the interrogation rooms. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of the base's coolant system. It was a tight fit, even for her, but she pressed on, driven by a desperate hope. Finally, she reached a grate overlooking the interrogation chamber. She carefully pried it open, peering down into the room below. Tarak was there, his imposing figure looming over Andrew, who was strapped to a chair. Tell us who you are working with, human, Tarak growled. Confess your involvement in the attack and your cooperation will be considered. I told you I'm not working with anyone. Andrew's voice was strained but defiant. I'm telling the truth. There's a conspiracy. You have to believe me. Tarak leaned closer, his mandibles clicking menacingly. We have evidence that suggests otherwise. Evidence that conveniently points to your involvement. He gestured to a holographic display that showed falsified communications logs implicating Andrew in the attack. Nova gasped, her blood running cold. Tarak was framing him. He was manipulating the interrogation, twisting the truth to fit his own agenda. She had to get to Andrew. She had to expose Tarak's conspiracy, but she couldn't do it alone. She retreated from the ventilation shaft, her mind racing. She needed allies, Prylorians who still believed in the alliance, who wouldn't stand for Tarak's treachery. She knew it was a long shot, but she had to try. Her small stature and unassuming appearance allowed her to move unnoticed through much of the base. She began discreetly contacting engineers, technicians, even a few low-ranking officers she knew to be sympathetic to humanity. She spoke in hushed tones, painting a picture of Tarak's conspiracy and Andrew's innocence. Slowly, cautiously, a few agreed to help. They were risking everything, but they believed in Nova, and they believed in the Alliance. News reached her that Andrew's transfer was scheduled for tomorrow morning. He was being moved off-world, to a place where his voice would never be heard. Time was running out. Nova gathered her small group of allies in a secluded maintenance tunnel. The flickering lights cast long, distorted shadows on their faces. "They're transferring Andrew tomorrow," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "We have to get him out of here. We have to break him out of the base." Nova inhaled sharply, steeling her determination. This has to work, for Andrew, for everyone. Her plan, hatched in the dead of night with the few Prilorians she dared trust, was audacious, bordering on suicidal. But Andrew's life and perhaps the fragile peace between their species hung in the balance. She tapped the comm device hidden beneath her scaled vest. Phase 1 initiated. Remember the sequence. No deviations. The diversion was messy. Explosions, carefully calibrated to be more disruptive than destructive, rocked the outer perimeter of the base. Alarms blared, and the usual regimented patrols dissolved into panicked clusters. But the Prilorian security forces, hardened by generations of warfare, responded with alarming speed. More security drones than anticipated swarmed the area, their crimson optics painting the chaos in stark, unforgiving light. Too much attention. We're attracting too much attention. A flicker of movement in the shadows. A small, nervous Prilorian engineer, his carapace dull with grease and anxiety, scurried towards her. "Nova, I managed to get you this." He thrust a data chip into her hand, his voice barely a whisper. "It's a stolen access code, Sector 7, near the detention cells, restricted access level 4. It's the best I could do." He glanced nervously at the approaching drones. "Good luck. And thank you for trying." Then, he melted back into the pandemonium. Sector 7 was a labyrinth of maintenance tunnels and restricted research labs, designed to deter intruders with a gauntlet of environmental hazards. The air thrummed with barely audible ultrasonic frequencies, designed to disorient and incapacitate. Cryogenic vents hissed, releasing plumes of supercooled gas that threatened to freeze exposed skin in seconds. Laser grids crisscrossed the corridors, their invisible beams ready to slice through anything that dared to trespass. Nova gritted her teeth, her small frame trembling with the cold. She focused, her mind racing, analyzing the schematics of the environmental controls she had managed to download earlier. With nimble fingers, she rerouted power conduits, bypassed security protocols, and recalibrated sensor arrays. The ultrasonic frequencies faded, the cryogenic vents sputtered and died, and the laser grids flickered and vanished. A temporary breach, a window of opportunity, bought with her skill and daring. Meanwhile, in the depths of his cell, Andrew fought. The Prilorian guards, though physically imposing, were no match for his years of combat experience. He moved with a speed and ferocity that belied his captivity, using their own bulk against them. A swift kick to the knee, a brutal elbow to the throat, a disarming maneuver learned on 100 battlefields. But the fight was taking its toll. His ribs ached, his head throbbed, and a trickle of blood ran down his temple. Minor injuries, easily ignored in the heat of battle, but a grim reminder of his vulnerability. Nova reached the cell block, her heart pounding against her ribs. The access panel glowed ominously. She inserted the data chip, her fingers trembling as she entered the stolen code. The lock disengaged with a soft click, but the silence was shattered by the piercing shriek of the alarm. They were out of time. The cell door hissed open, revealing Andrew, battered but unbroken. His eyes met hers, a silent conversation passing between them. Relief, gratitude, and an unwavering persistence. "Nova," he breathed, his voice hoarse, "I knew you'd come. We don't have time for sentiment," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Tarak is planning something big, something that could destroy everything." They moved through the base, a mismatched pair united by a shared purpose. Prylorian soldiers, alerted by the alarm, converged on their location. Andrew, a whirlwind of lethal efficiency, neutralized them with brutal precision. He weaved and dodged, using cover and concealment to his advantage, protecting Nova with his body. Each takedown was swift, silent, and utterly decisive. As they moved, Nova accessed the base's internal communications network. Lines of code scrolled across her visor as she searched for clues, for any indication of Tarok's plan. Then, she found it. Intercepted communications, encrypted but poorly, revealed a chilling conspiracy. Tarok was planning to sabotage the upcoming peace negotiation with humanity, framing them for a series of attacks on Prylorian outposts. His goal to reignite the war, to solidify his power, to crush any hope of lasting peace. He's going to blame humanity, Nova said, her voice filled with horror. He's going to start a war. We have to stop him, Andrew said grimly. We have to expose his lies. How? Nova asked, her mind racing. He controls the entire fleet. No one will believe us. We use his own system against him, Andrew said, a glint of steel in his eyes. We broadcast his conspiracy to the entire Prylorian fleet. We show them the truth. The communications center was heavily guarded, a fortress within a fortress. But Andrew, drawing on his years of military experience, devised a plan. A feint, a diversion, a carefully orchestrated series of maneuvers designed to draw the guards away from the main entrance. They reached the center, only to be confronted by Tarok himself, flanked by a squad of elite soldiers. His eyes burned with fury. "Traitor!" he roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You will not interfere with the destiny of our people." A firefight erupted. Laser fire crisscrossed the room, illuminating the scene in a blinding strobe. Andrew, a human shield, positioned himself between Nova and the enemy, returning fire with deadly accuracy. Nova, her fingers flying across the control panel, initiated the broadcast sequence. The message began to transmit, Tarok's voice, dripping with venom, exposed for all to hear. But Tarok, with a desperate lunge, disabled the system before the entire message could be transmitted. The broadcast cut off, leaving only a fragment of the truth, enough to sow confusion and doubt, but not enough to expose the full extent of his treachery. They fled, pursued by Tarok and his soldiers, plunging into the labyrinthine depths of the base. They reached the emergency evacuation shuttle bay, their last hope for escape. But their hearts sank as they saw the sabotaged shuttles, their engines ripped apart, their control panels smashed. "He's thought of everything," Nova whispered, her voice filled with despair. Tarok's forces were closing in, their footsteps echoing through the corridors. Time was running out. With nowhere left to run, Nova and Andrew were forced to flee into the darkness, into the unknown depths of the base, their fate hanging precariously in the balance. The narrow maintenance tunnel vibrated with the echo of approaching footsteps. "They're gaining on us," Andrew grunted, his voice tight. He pushed ahead, Nova close behind, the flickering emergency lights painting their faces in harsh, alternating shadows. They burst into a secondary evacuation shuttle bay, a smaller, less maintained area than the one they'd just left. Rows of sleek, single-pilot shuttles stood silent, promising escape. But Nova's hope flickered and died as she scanned the nearest vessel. "They're sabotaged," she said, her voice flat. "Power regulators are completely fried, useless." Andrew ran a hand over the scorch components. "Can you fix it?" "Maybe," Nova replied, already moving towards a cluster of damaged drones piled in a corner. "I can scavenge working regulators from those, but it's risky. This area will be crawling with Tarok's forces soon." "Then we don't have much time." Andrew surveyed the bay, his eyes scanning for anything he could use. "I'll keep them busy." While Nova worked, her small hands moving with practiced speed, Andrew began setting up improvised defenses. He overturned storage crates, creating makeshift barricades. He rerouted power conduits to create electrical traps, the air crackling with energy. He jammed access panels, rigging them to collapse and slow down anyone trying to pass. A klaxon blared, its shrill tone echoing through the bay. Automated lockdown sequence initiated, a cold, mechanical voice announced. All escape routes sealed. Metal shutters slammed down, sealing off the exits. Red lights pulsed ominously. From the ceiling, a dozen combat drones detached from their moorings, their weapon systems activating with a menacing hum. Nova cursed. I can reroute power from the drone charging stations, temporarily override the lockdown, but the drones will still be active and hostile. Do it, Andrew said, already raising his weapon. I'll handle the drones. Nova worked furiously, rerouting power lines, sparks flying from her makeshift tools. The lockdown shutters shuddered, momentarily retracting before slamming back into place. The drones swiveled, targeting Andrew. He moved with a speed surprising for his size, firing controlled bursts, taking down one drone after another. But they were too many. He took cover behind a toppled crate, the air around him filled with laser fire. Almost there, Nova shouted, her voice strained. She slammed a final connection into place. The drones faltered, their movements becoming erratic. I've rerouted their targeting matrix, now to reprogram them. I'll keep them busy, Andrew yelled back, leaping from cover, drawing the drone's fire. Nova worked frantically, her fingers flying across the drone's control panel. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. With a final keystroke, she uploaded the new programming. The drones whirred, their targeting systems recalibrating. Then, with a sudden, coordinated movement, they turned and unleashed their firepower on the approaching Prylorian soldiers, sowing chaos and confusion. Now's our chance, Nova yelled. Andrew sprinted towards the repaired shuttle, Nova close behind. They scrambled inside, the cockpit lights flickering to life. Nova ran a diagnostic check. Wait, she said, her brow furrowing. The navigation system. It's been tampered with, programmed to crash us into the asteroid field. Can you fix it? Andrew asked, his voice grim. I can jury-rig a bypass, use spare components to reroute the signal, but the trajectory will be unstable, very unstable. Before she could begin, the shuttle shuddered violently. A heavy weapon, likely from Tarok himself, had struck the engines. Alarms blared. The shuttle veered wildly off course. Brace yourself, Andrew shouted. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the comms. Shuttle, this is Echo 7. I'm patching in a safe navigational override code. Use it now. Nova recognized the voice, a Prylorian pilot, someone she'd met in passing but never suspected of harboring anti-Tarok sentiments. Who is this? She asked, even as she began inputting the code. No time for explanations. Tarok knows I'm helping you. Just get out of there. The code uploaded. Nova made minute adjustments, her hands steady despite the chaos. The shuttle shuddered again, but this time the trajectory stabilized. Through the viewport, she saw the asteroid field looming, a chaotic jumble of rock and ice. They were seconds away from impact. With a final surge of power, the shuttle pulled away, narrowly avoiding a collision. He's targeting Echo 7. Andrew shouted, pointing at the viewport. Tarok's forces were converging on the pilot's ship, laser fire crisscrossing the void. He bought us time, Nova said, her voice heavy with gratitude and guilt. We have to go. Andrew nodded grimly. He initiated the hyperspace jump. The stars stretched and blurred as the shuttle accelerated to unimaginable speeds, leaving behind the chaos and uncertainty of the Prylorian base. Safe in hyperspace, Nova slumped back in her seat, exhaustion etched on her face. But then she noticed something odd about the override code. Andrew, she said, her voice tight. There's a hidden message embedded in the pilot's code. Encrypted, but I can crack it. She worked quickly, her fingers flying across the console. The message decrypted, revealing a series of encrypted communications. As she read them, her eyes widened in horror. Tarok. He's been collaborating with a rogue human faction. They're planning to destabilize the Alliance. Andrew swore, his breath misting in the chill of the abandoned chamber. Damn it, Tarok's thorough. Nova, her brow furrowed in concentration, tapped furiously at the console. There's a hidden partition, a secondary encryption layer. Give me a moment. Her fingers danced across the cracked keys, the faint glow of the screen illuminating her determined face. Moments stretched into an eternity before a series of symbols dedicationed into coherent text. It's authentic, Nova declared, her voice tight with suppressed anger. Encoded with a cipher used by human Black Ops teams, classified beyond top secret. Andrew's heart made. Then we know Tarok's working with rogue elements. Our first priority is to get this to Admiral Jenkins. She's one of the few I trust implicitly. But the encrypted comm channels are being monitored, Nova pointed out, her fingers tracing lines on the console. They'll be listening for any mention of Tarok or the conspiracy. Her gaze drifted to the cracked ceiling, then back to Andrew, a spark of ingenuity in her eyes. There's an abandoned comm relay on the moon of Xylos. Low bandwidth, practically derelict. No one uses it anymore. We could send an unencrypted message, a coded phrase that only Jenkins will recognize. Andrew nodded, understanding immediately. Brilliant. Something innocuous but with a pre-arranged meaning. The journey to Xylos' moon was fraught with tension. As they approached the desolate rock, a warning klaxon blared in the cockpit. Prylorian fighters incoming. Nova exclaimed, her hands flying across the controls. 3 sleek interceptors materialized from the void, their weapons ports glowing menacingly. Leading the formation was a fighter emblazoned with the insignia of Commander Ryla, a former acquaintance of Nova's. "This is Commander Ryla," a voice crackled over the comms. "Identify yourselves and prepare to be boarded. Your unauthorized departure has been noted." Andrew took the comm. "Ryla, this is Andrew Lewis. We have information of vital importance regarding a conspiracy that threatens both our species. We need to speak with Admiral Jenkins immediately." There was a long pause. "Lewis, what are you doing with Nova? This is insane. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." "Ryla, listen to me," Andrew pleaded. "I can't explain everything now, but I have verifiable evidence. If you agree to escort us to a neutral location, I'll present it to you. If not, this alliance is doomed." After another agonizing pause, Ryla's voice returned, infused with disbelief. "A neutral location. Very well, but I'm watching you, Lewis. One wrong move." The derelict comm relay on Xylos' moon was a monument to forgotten technology. Dust coated every surface, and flickering lights cast long, eerie shadows. "Give me a few minutes," Nova said, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "The power core is almost depleted." As Nova worked feverishly to reactivate the relay, Andrew and Ryla stood guard outside, the uneasy truce hanging heavy in the air. Suddenly, a volley of laser fire erupted from the shadows. "Mercenaries!" Andrew roared, drawing his weapon. Tarok must have anticipated this. Ryla, her face grim, returned fire with deadly accuracy. But the mercenaries were numerous, their weapons powerful. Andrew fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, deflecting laser blasts and taking down attackers with brutal efficiency. Inside the relay, Nova watched the progress bar crawl agonizingly slowly. Almost there. Finally, with a surge of power, the relay sprang to life, transmitting its coded message into the void. But their victory was short-lived. The mercenaries, having overwhelmed Ryla's forces, stormed the relay, disabling the equipment and capturing the Prylorian commander. "We have to go," Andrew yelled, grabbing Nova's hand. "They'll be after us now." Back on Earth, Admiral Jenkins received the coded message. A flicker of recognition crossed her face. "That's an old Black Ops distress signal. What in God's name?" She immediately initiated a discreet investigation but met with resistance at every turn. "Admiral, with all due respect," one of her subordinates argued, "this sounds like Prylorian propaganda. They're trying to destabilize the alliance." "I know Lewis," Jenkins countered, her voice steely. He wouldn't send this unless it was serious. I want a full investigation, and I want it now. Andrew and Nova, now fugitives, sought refuge with the family of the Prylorian pilot who had helped them escape Tarok's clutches, but they found his family ostracized, their home under surveillance. The pilot's father, a respected elder, greeted them with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "My son. He tried to warn us about Tarok, but they silenced him, discredited him. We thought he was delusional." "He wasn't," Nova said, her voice filled with conviction. "He was telling the truth. Do you know where we can find his datapad? He must have kept records." The elder nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and grief. "He hid it. In the old family shrine. It's dangerous to go there. We are being watched." Working under the cover of darkness, Andrew and Nova recovered the pilot's hidden datapad. The files were heavily encrypted, but Nova, with her unparalleled skills, began the arduous process of decryption. As the files began to unravel, a disturbing picture emerged. Details of Tarok's conspiracy, the rogue human faction's involvement, and references to something called the Architects and the Legacy Project. "What is this Legacy Project?" Andrew asked, his brow furrowed. Nova scrolled through the decrypted text. "It mentions a powerful ancient technology hidden on Prylos, dismissed as myth. They call it the Forgotten Tech." The datapad also revealed the location of a secret research facility, where the rogue human faction was attempting to reverse engineer a deactivated alien artifact they had recovered from a dig site. Andrew's blood ran cold as he read the description of the artifact. "That's a weapon of mass destruction, outlawed by the Galactic Concordance centuries ago. These bastards are planning to unleash it." Nova discovered a schematic diagram of the research facility's security system hidden within the datapad, providing a potential entry point. "We have to stop them," Andrew said, his voice grim. "We have to gather irrefutable proof of this conspiracy and prevent them from weaponizing that artifact." As they prepared for the infiltration, Nova turned to Andrew, her eyes filled with concern. "This forgotten tech, what if it's even more dangerous than we imagine? What if it destabilizes the fragile alliance?" Andrew placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll find out, Nova. Humanity's curiosity isn't a curse but a boon. We will uncover the truth, no matter the consequences." Andrew consulted the security schematic on the datapad, his brow furrowed. "Okay, Nova, the main research lab is 3 levels down. According to this, we need to stick to the outer perimeter to avoid the initial detection sensors." The corridor was a sterile white, punctuated by humming machinery and the occasional hiss of ventilation. Shadows danced in the periphery of their helmet lights, each flicker a potential threat. They moved with practiced efficiency, Andrew leading the way, his pulse rifle held at the ready. Suddenly, a red light bathed the corridor. A synthesized voice boomed, "Warning, biological signature scan in progress. Unauthorized personnel detected." "Damn," Andrew muttered. "A secondary security layer. I didn't see this on the schematic." Nova quickly accessed her wrist-mounted console, her fingers flying across the holographic display. "It's a bioscanner. It's analyzing our biological signatures to confirm authorization. Give me a minute." Sweat beaded on Nova's forehead as she rerouted power from her environmental suit's filtration system to its camouflage emitters. "Almost there," she exclaimed, inputting the final command. "I've modified our suits to mimic the biosignatures of the facility's research staff. It should buy us some time." The red light flickered, then turned green. "Biological signature confirmed. Proceed." The synthesized voice was gone. They continued deeper into the facility, the tension ratcheting up with each step. A low growl echoed from a nearby chamber. Andrew cautiously peered inside. His face hardened. "Nova, you're not going to like this." Inside, Prylorian wildlife sleek, 6-legged predators native to Nova's homeworld were caged and subjected to a battery of tests. Scientists in white coats injected them with glowing serums, their eyes alight with cruel ambition. The creatures snarled and clawed at their enclosures, their aggression clearly amplified. Nova gasped, her crest drooping in distress. "What are they doing to them?" "Experimenting," Andrew replied grimly. "Trying to weaponize them, it looks like." He pointed to a nearby datapad. "And look at this. Evidence that they are conducting illegal genetic experiments." They pressed on, navigating a maze of corridors and security checkpoints. Nova seamlessly bypassed each obstacle, her engineering skills proving invaluable. She created a diversion by overloading a nearby power conduit, plunging a section of the facility into darkness while they slipped past a security patrol. Finally, they reached the main research lab. The air crackled with an almost palpable energy. In the center of the room, resting on a raised platform, was the artifact. It was a large, crystalline structure, its facets shimmering with an otherworldly light. A faint hum emanated from within, a sound that vibrated deep in their bones. Andrew approached the artifact cautiously, running his hand over its smooth surface. "These inscriptions. I recognize them. This is a harmonic resonator." "Harmonic resonator?" Nova asked, tilting her head. "What does it do?" "It amplifies emotions," Andrew explained, his voice grave. "On a planetary scale. Imagine the chaos if someone were to weaponize this thing." "That's exactly what they intend to do," a cold voice echoed the doorway. "Doctor." Aris Thorne, the leader of the rogue faction, strode into the lab, flanked by a squad of heavily armed security personnel. "Welcome, Commander Lewis, Engineer Nova. I anticipated your intrusion. I must admit, you both have been more resourceful than I would have guessed. But you're too late." He sneered. "You will be my first test subjects." "I don't think so," Andrew growled, raising his pulse rifle. The firefight erupted. Andrew moved with a speed and precision that belied his size, his combat skills honed by years of war. Pulse fire ripped through the lab, shattering equipment and sending sparks flying. Nova, though not a warrior, was far from helpless. She used her knowledge of the facility's systems to her advantage, remotely disabling security drones and manipulating the lab doctor environmental controls. Dr. Thorne, unfazed by the chaos, raised his hand, a manic glint in his eyes. "Activate the resonator." One of the scientists complied, throwing a switch on a nearby console. The crystalline structure pulsed with blinding light, and the humming intensified into a deafening roar. A wave of pure, unadulterated aggression washed over the lab. The caged wildlife, already agitated by the experiments, erupted in a frenzy. They smashed through their enclosures and turned on the researchers, their amplified rage overwhelming all reason. Andrew swore. "Nova, we need to get out of here." Using the chaos as cover, they battled their way through the facility, dodging pulse fire and evading the rampaging creatures. The air was thick with the stench of ozone and fear. "I can overload the resonator," Nova shouted over the din, her voice tight with concentration. "But it will destroy the facility." "Do it." Andrew yelled back, firing a burst of pulse fire at a pursuing scientist. Nova accessed the resonator's control interface, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. She bypassed the safety protocols and initiated the overload sequence. The crystalline structure began to glow with an unbearable intensity, emitting a high-pitched whine that threatened to shatter their eardrums. With a final surge of power, the resonator overloaded, unleashing a localized electromagnetic pulse that disabled the facility's power grid. The lights flickered and died, plunging the lab into darkness. The rampaging creatures collapsed, their amplified aggression extinguished. Andrew grabbed Nova's hand, pulling her towards the exit. "Now." They raced through the darkened corridors, the ground shaking beneath their feet. The facility was collapsing around them, the walls groaning and cracking. They burst through the main entrance just as the Dr. Tyre structure imploded, burying Dr. Thorne and his faction beneath tons of rubble. Gasping for breath, they stumbled away from the wreckage. Andrew activated his comm unit. Admiral Jenkins, this is Dr. M. Mander Lewis. The facility is destroyed. Dr. Thorne and his faction are neutralized. We have visual confirmation of the harmonic resonator and data logs detailing their conspiracy. I'm sending you our location. A pause, then Admiral Jenkins' voice, strained but clear. Lewis, I'm receiving your transmission. Stand by for extraction. They waited in the eerie silence, the only sound the crackling of the flames consuming the remains of the facility. Nova stared at the inferno, her face pale. That harmonic resonator. It's based on the same principles as the forgotten tech. Her voice trembled. Tarak will be looking for it, and if he gets his hands on it, the galaxy is doomed. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket woven from fear and uncertainty. On a comm screen aboard the UNS Relentless, Admiral Jenkins' face was etched with dogged drive. She addressed a holographic projection of Elias Thorne, leader of the rogue faction. Elias, this ends now. Surrender your prototypes, disclose the full extent of the conspiracy, and I guarantee amnesty for you and your followers. Thorne's image flickered, his eyes burning with fanaticism. Amnesty? We demand autonomy, the right to chart our own course, free from the Council's stifling control. Meet our demands, or we will weaponize those resonators. Human-controlled space will burn. The transmission cut. Jenkins sighed, the weight of command pressing down on her. Helm, prepare for fleet deployment. Target all known rogue faction installations. Secure the resonator technology. This is a limited engagement, but we will use necessary force. News of the impending human civil war spread like wildfire across Prylar. In the bustling marketplaces, whispers turned to shouts. Distrust blossomed, poisoning the fragile alliance. Humans fighting humans, how can we trust them to defend us? At Nova's family home, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Her uncle Torvin thumped his hand on the table, rattling the crystalware. You vouched for them, Nova, said they were different. Look at what their peace has brought us chaos. Nova's mother placed a calming hand on Torvin's arm, her voice imbued with worry. Torvin, please. Nova has only ever acted in the best interests of Prylar. Has she? Torvin spat. Or has she been blinded by her infatuation with that? Human. Andrew, standing silently by Nova's side, sharpened his eyes. He reached for Nova's hand, his grip firm and reassuring. I made a promise to protect you and Prylar. I intend to keep it. Inwardly, a storm raged. His loyalties were being torn apart. Humanity was fracturing, and he was caught in the middle. Suddenly, a priority alert blared from Nova's datapad. She tapped the screen, her eyes widening in alarm. Tarak's fleet. It's approaching Prylar, fast. They're drawn to the energy signature of the forgotten tech. Outside, the sky darkened as Tarak scout ships pierced the atmosphere, their sleek, menacing forms casting long shadows across the land. They began probing Prylorian defense systems, their sensors relentlessly searching for the location of the forgotten tech. Inside the Prylorian council chambers, chaos reigned. Counselor Lyra, her voice trembling, addressed the assembled dignitaries. We must appease him, reveal the location of the forgotten tech. It's the only way to avoid a direct confrontation. Nova rose to her feet, her small stature radiating defiance. Appeasement is surrender. We cannot yield to Tarak's tyranny. We must stand firm and defend our sovereignty. Andrew stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. With respect, counselors, I have experience in these matters. Tarak will not be satisfied with just the technology. He will enslave your people. You must prepare for war. He spent the next hours advising the Prylorian defense forces, drawing on his knowledge of human military tactics, adapting them to Prylar's unique terrain and technology. Just as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold, Andrew received a secure transmission from Jenkins. Lewis, we need your H-Doctor. We've identified a high-ranking rogue scientist, Dr. Aris Thorne, Elias' sister, believed to possess vital information about the forgotten tech's true capabilities. We need her apprehended. Understood, Admiral. Andrew replied, his mind racing. There's more, Lewis. We also need Nova in human custody for questioning. Andrew's blood ran cold. Negative, Admiral, I will not betray Nova. This isn't a request, Lewis, it's an order. Her knowledge could save billions of lives. I understand the stakes, Adam DRL, but I will not hand her over. I will assist in capturing Dr. Thorne if you trust that I will act in everyone's best interests. Jenkins hesitated. Very well, Lewis, but know this, if Nova is withholding information, you will be held accountable. Andrew C. Dr. Ed the connection, turning to Nova, his face grave. We need to find Dr. Thorne. She has information that could help us stop Tarok. As they ventured out into the darkening streets, they were ambushed. Laser fire erupted from the shadows, tearing through the air. Rogue faction mercenaries clad in black armor swarmed them. Andrew fought fiercely, his movements a blur of lethal precision, but he was outnumbered. Andrew, go! Nova cried, shoving him towards cover. Before he could react, a stun blast slammed into Nova, sending her crashing to the ground. The mercenaries seized her, dragging her away into the darkness. Nova! Andrew roared, firing wildly, but it was too late. She was gone. He was left alone, the acrid smell of burnt ozone filling his nostrils, the echoes of her name ringing in his ears. He had a choice to make, and it had to be now. Above, the sky ripped open as Tarok's main fleet arrived in Prylorian orbit, a swarm of warships blotting out the stars. The invasion had begun. The first orbital bombardment commenced, vaporizing entire cities. On the Relentless, Jenkins watched helplessly as Prylar burned. Redirect all available ships to Prylar's defense, she barked. But even as she gave the order, rogue faction warships materialized from hyperspace, intercepting her fleet. Brace for impact, we're engaging. Deep within the bowels of a rogue faction warship, Nova regained consciousness. Her head throbbed and her vision swam. She was bound to a chair, Doctor, surrounded by armed guards. Ah, the little engineer awakens, a voice sneered. Doctor. Eris Thorne stepped into view, her eyes glinting with malicious glee. You're going to be very helpful in ensuring our victory, Prylorian. Your knowledge of the forgotten tech will be instrumental in weaponizing it for Tarok. It's the only way, Nova finished the sentence in her mind, a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. The energy conduits are subtly misaligned near Sector 4. A concentrated pulse, but I'd need access codes. She pasted a look of eager cooperation on her face as the lead scientist, a gaunt Prylorian with twitching antennae, gestured toward a holographic display. Observe, little one, he rasped, his voice reedy and unpleasant. Soon, Tarok will be unstoppable, the forgotten tech, amplified by his inherent aggression. A force that will scour the galaxy clean. The display shimmered, showcasing simulations of Tarok obliterating entire fleets with a single blast. Meanwhile, light years away, aboard the Dauntless, Andrew Lewis stood before Captain Jenkins. Her face was grim, the holographic projection of the battle raging around them, painting her features in flickering red and blue. Lewis, your orders are clear. We pursue the rogue faction. Prylorian security is their responsibility. Andrew clenched his fist. With all due respect, Captain, Nova is on that warship. I can't just abandon her. Jenkins' gaze hardened. Sentimentality is a luxury we can't afford, Sergeant, dismissed. But as Andrew turned to leave, he saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. He knew what he had to do. He slipped away from the bridge, his heart pounding in his chest. Disobeying a direct order was court-martial territory, but the thought of Nova in Tarok's clutches was unbearable. He rerouted through a maintenance tunnel, his pulse rifle-heavy in his hands. The battle above Prylar was a chaotic dance of destruction. Human and rogue faction warships exchanged volleys of energy blasts, leaving trails of burning debris in their wake. The Dauntless took a direct hit, alarms blaring as emergency bulkheads slammed shut. On Prylar itself, the council chamber was a scene of pandemonium. We must surrender, Counselor Lyra cried, her voice shrill with panic. We cannot withstand such an assault. Never. Nova's father, General Varro, roared. We will fight to the last Prilorian. The debate raged, mirroring the devastation unfolding outside. Back on the rogue warship, Nova worked with feigned enthusiasm, her small hands manipulating the complex energy matrix. Almost. Just a little more. With a surge of adrenaline, she bypassed a safety interlock and introduced a micro-fracture into a critical focusing crystal. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber, barely audible but enough. What was that? The lead scientist snapped, his antennae twitching nervously. Just a minor fluctuation, Nova said quickly, forcing a smile. The system is incredibly sensitive. But deep inside, she knew she'd bought them some time, and she'd also painted a target on her back. Suddenly, the cell door hissed open. Andrew stood there, silhouetted against the flickering corridor lights, his face grim but determined. Nova, we're getting out of here. He moved like a ghost, disabling the security cameras with precise shots from his sidearm. Andrew, how? No time to explain. He gripped her hand, pulling her towards him. I saw you using the comm system, sending a message. Coded to the resistance, she confirmed. Hoping someone picks it up. They moved swiftly through the ship's corridors, using Andrew's knowledge of human military tactics and Nova's familiarity with the ship's layout to evade detection. They triggered a series of false alarms, venting sections of the ship to create diversions. Below, on Prylar, Terok's ground forces were unleashing a wave of terror. Cities burned, monuments crumbled, and the screams of the dying echoed through the streets. His forces were systematically targeting key infrastructure, crippling Prilorian defenses. But amidst the chaos, pockets of resistance were emerging. Led by General Varro, Prilorian fighters launched guerrilla attacks, ambushing Terok's patrols and protecting civilians. As Andrew and Nova navigated the labyrinthine corridors, they stumbled upon the rogue scientist they had been pursuing before her capture. He was huddled over a console, his face pale with fear. It's true, he stammered, his voice trembling. The forgotten tech, it has a failsafe, a way to prevent it from being used for aggression. Then activate it, Andrew demanded. I can't, the scientist said, shaking his head. The activation code. It's hidden within Nova's genetic code, only she can unlock it. Above, the Dauntless was taking a beating. Captain, shields are failing. The comms officer shouted. We can't hold out much longer. Jenkins made a split-second decision. All ships fall back. Prioritize the defense of Prylar. We can't risk the planet for a single warship. Andrew and Nova reached the ship's hangar, only to find it guarded by Terok's elite warriors. Clad in black armor and wielding energy swords, they were a formidable force. You won't leave here alive, their leader snarled. The weapon will reach Terok. Nova exchanged a look with Andrew. Not if we have anything to say about it. The battle was fierce and brutal. Andrew, with his superior combat skills, took on the brunt of the assault, while Nova used her agility and knowledge of the hangar systems to create openings. Laser fire ricocheted off the walls and the air crackled with energy. Despite the odds, they fought with a desperate persistence. Prylar's fate, and perhaps the galaxy's, rested on their shoulders. Finally, they broke through the guard and reached the main console. I've found the access point. Nova shouted, her fingers flying across the controls. Transmitting the failsafe code now. But as the code pulsed through the system, a chilling voice echoed through the hangar. Foolish girl, Terok sneered, his image appearing on a nearby screen. Did you really think it would be that easy? I've intercepted your code, and now, I will initiate a counter-sequence, one that will amplify the weapon's power beyond anything you can imagine. The hangar began to shake violently, and the forgotten tech pulsed with an ominous energy. Andrew grabbed Nova, pulling her towards the escape hatch. We have to get out of here. They barely managed to scramble into a small transport ship as the hangar doors sealed shut. As they sped away from the warship, Nova felt a wave of despair wash over her. Had they failed? Was Prylar doomed? Despite the chaos, the Prylorian resistance managed to retake a key communication hub. A message, crackling with static, was broadcast across the planet. "This is General Varro. We will not surrender. We will fight for our freedom. We will prevail." A small beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. The escape pod bucked violently, alarms blaring a discordant symphony of impending doom. Metal screamed against the friction of Prylor's atmosphere, the heat searing through the reinforced hull. Andrew gripped Nova tightly, his body a shield against the inevitable impact. "Brace yourself," he yelled over the din, his voice strained. The crash was brutal. The pod slammed into the ground, throwing them against their restraints. A cacophony of grinding metal and shattering glass filled the air. When the dust settled, they were alive, but the pod was a mangled wreck. They stumbled out into a scene of devastation. Terok's forces had unleashed hell on Prylor. Buildings lay in ruins, fires raged, and the air was thick with smoke and the stench of death. Prylorian resistance fighters clashed with Terok's troops in desperate skirmishes, laser fire crisscrossing the sky. The cries of the wounded echoed through the chaos. "We have to get to the command center," Nova said, her voice trembling. "My father." They navigated the war-torn streets, dodging debris and enemy fire. Andrew, ever vigilant, scanned their surroundings, his pulse rifle raised. They witnessed acts of both cruelty and heroism. A Prylorian soldier sacrificing himself to save a group of civilians, a human medic tending to the wounded under heavy fire. Finally, they reached the Resistance Command Center, a fortified bunker hidden beneath the ruins of a once grand building. The atmosphere inside was grim. Weary officers huddled around holographic displays, their faces etched with despair. "Nova," a voice called out. Nova's father, General Varkas, rushed towards her, his face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "You're alive, thank the stars." "Father, what's the situation?" Nova asked, her eyes scanning the displays. "Dire," Varkas replied, his voice heavy. "Terok is planning to activate the amplified forgotten tech within hours. Once he does, it's over. Prylor will fall. The council is on the verge of surrendering," another officer added. "They believe further resistance is futile." Varkas turned to the Prylorian council, his voice pleading. "Councilors, I beg you, wait. Nova has a plan. She can stop Terok." The council members, their faces gaunt and weary, looked at Nova with skepticism. "She's too small," one of them scoffed. "What can she possibly do?" "I have a connection to the forgotten tech," Nova said, her voice rising with purpose. "A genetic link. I can use it to shut down the device from within, but it requires entering the core." "It's suicide," one of the counselors exclaimed. "It's our only chance," Nova countered. Andrew stepped forward, his voice firm. "I'll go with her, I promise to protect her." A murmur went through the room. A human volunteering for a suicide mission to save Prylor. It was unheard of. Varkas looked at Andrew with gratitude. "Thank you, human, your courage is unexpected." A small team of human and Prylorian volunteers was assembled, their faces grim but determined. They were ready to risk everything to stop Terok. Just then, a comms officer shouted, "General, we're receiving a transmission from Jenkins' fleet. They've broken through the blockade and are entering Prylor's orbit." A collective cheer erupted in the command center. The arrival of Jenkins' fleet, though battered, provided crucial air support, evening the odds. Under the cover of the aerial bombardment, the team infiltrated Terok's fortress, a towering structure of black metal and pulsating energy. The fortress was heavily defended, with laser grids, automated turrets, and Terok's elite guard patrolling the corridors. Andrew led the way, his pulse rifle blazing, clearing a path for Nova and the others. They fought their way through the fortress, facing heavy resistance at every turn. Prylorians and humans fought side by side, their courage fueled by the hope of saving their world. Finally, they reached the forgotten tech chamber. The air crackled with energy, the device looming before them like a monstrous crystalline heart. Standing before the device was Tarok, his eyes burning with fanaticism. "Welcome, Nova," he sneered. "I've been expecting you." "It's over, Tarok," Nova said, her voice trembling but resolute. "You can't win." "Oh, but I already have," Tarok replied, a sinister smile spreading across his face. "I anticipated your plan, Nova. I've modified the device. Your attempt to shut it down will only amplify its power." Andrew lunged at Tarok, his fist connecting with the Prilorian's jaw. "You won't get away with this." A fierce hand-to-hand combat ensued. Andrew, despite his superior strength, found himself struggling against Tarok's agility and ruthlessness. While Andrew fought Tarok, Nova raced against time to find a way to override Tarok's modifications. She accessed the device's control panel, her fingers flying across the keys, deciphering the complex code. "I found something," she exclaimed. "A failsafe, but it requires not just my genetic code but also a specific emotional state. Empathy for Tarok. Empathy for the monster who had destroyed her world." It seemed impossible, but Nova knew she had no choice. She activated a direct neural link, connecting her mind to the device and through it to Tarok. She flooded his mind with visions of a peaceful future, a future where humans and Prilorians lived in harmony, a future where Tarok was a leader, not a destroyer. For a moment she thought it might work. Tarok's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but then his fanaticism returned, stronger than ever. "Foolish girl," he roared, "your sentimental visions mean nothing to me." The device began to overload, energy surging out of control. Alarms blared and the chamber shook violently. "It's going to explode," Andrew yelled, his voice barely audible over the din. Thinking all hope was lost, Andrew threw himself between Tarok and Nova, his body a shield against the impending blast. The overload reached its peak. An explosion of energy erupted from the device, blasting Andrew and Tarok to opposite sides of the room. The chamber's shield flickered, protecting Nova from the full force of the blast. When the energy subsided, the chamber was in ruins. Andrew lay motionless on the floor, his body battered and bruised. Tarok, though injured, slowly rose to his feet. He saw Nova standing alone amidst the wreckage, vulnerable and defenseless. A cruel smile spread across his face. "It seems I win after all," he said, his voice raspy. He moved towards her, intent on finishing what he had started. As he drew closer, his eyes widened. He stopped dead in his tracks, a look of shock and disbelief on his face. He was seeing something within Nova that he couldn't comprehend, something that stopped him in his tracks. Tarok, still linked to the forgotten tech, staggered. The weapon in his hands dissolved not into plasma, but into a cascade of images. Prilorian cities choked by prejudice, technological advancements stifled by a narrow definition of strength, and the hollow victories of a warrior culture that had forgotten its own potential. He saw the faces of his ancestors, their faces etched with the regret of their failure when they activated the tech generations ago, a failure rooted in their inability to see beyond their own aggression. It was a future he had unknowingly been perpetuating. Nova focused, her silver eyes blazing with purpose. Through the neural link, she amplified this vision, sending it resonating through Tarok's deepest desires. She showed him Prilor freed from its self-imposed limitations, a future where ingenuity was as valued as physical prowess, where compassion was not a weakness but a strength. She proved, without uttering a word, that the right of ascendancy could measure intelligence too, and that the way to defeat the forgotten tech was to accept its amplification effect to show Tarok empathy. The forgotten tech, designed to amplify aggression, buckled under this unexpected surge of empathy. Its crystalline structure pulsed erratically, the energy fluctuating wildly, threatening to overload. Sparks flew and the air crackled with uncontrolled power. Andrew, scrambling to his feet, saw Tarok faltering, overwhelmed by the vision. His first instinct was to protect Nova, to shield her from the fallout. But Nova, her hand outstretched, signaled him to stand down. She knew what to do. Closing her eyes, Nova focused her will. Years of engineering training, combined with the empathy Andrew had awakened in her, gave her the key. She visualized the tech's energy pathways, recalibrating the flow, turning its amplifying effect inward, forcing it to reverse its function. She poured her understanding of both Prylorian and human science into the machine, rewriting its purpose with her very being. With a final surge of energy, the forgotten tech shuddered. Its power core stabilized, the erratic pulsing subsided, and the threat to Prylor and humanity vanished. The failsafe worked as intended, once Tarok demonstrated empathy. Tarok collapsed, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. The tech's influence receded, leaving him with a profound sense of remorse for the prejudice that had blinded him, for the lives he had endangered, and for the future he had almost destroyed. The Prylorian Council arrived, their faces grim, to witness the aftermath. They saw Tarok defeated, the deactivated forgotten tech at his feet, and the exhausted but resolute figure of Nova standing beside Andrew. They finally understood the truth. Tarok's actions had been driven by fear and prejudice, fueled by the tech's insidious influence. In the wake of the crisis, the alliance between humans and Prylorians was solidified. Leaders from both species pledged to work together, to rebuild what had been damaged, and to create a lasting peace based on shared values and mutual respect. They promised to dismantle the systems of prejudice and fear that had allowed Tarok's conspiracy to take root. Tarok, stripped of his rank and power, was given a fair trial. He acknowledged his crimes, accepting full responsibility for his actions. He expressed a sincere desire to atone for his transgressions by dedicating his life to dismantling the very systems of prejudice and fear that had fueled his conspiracy. Andrew and Nova, now hailed as heroes by both species, stood together, their love a beacon of hope and unity. They had faced prejudice, betrayal, and the threat of annihilation, but their bond had only grown stronger, a testament to the power of understanding and acceptance. A vision of the future unfolded, humans and Prylorians working side by side, sharing knowledge and resources, celebrating their differences, and embracing a new era of understanding and cooperation. The right of ascendancy had been modified to include cognitive and empathy portions, so that smaller Prylorians may be more valued. Years later, Andrew and Nova stood overlooking a joint human Prylorian academy dedicated to innovation and empathy. The academy was a testament to their love and the lasting legacy of their actions, a place where future generations would learn to bridge the gaps between species and cultures. Andrew turned to Nova, his eyes filled with love and admiration. "We did it," he said softly. "We saved them all." Nova smiled, her hand finding his. "We did it together," she replied, her voice filled with warmth. Their bond was stronger than ever, forged in the fires of adversity, a love that had not only saved their people, but had also created a better future for generations to come.